Good evening, family. Good evening. Good evening. What a joy and certainly a joy to welcome you to this evening's General Conference Boot Camp. We are so excited to welcome you to this very important first installment of our General Conference Boot Camp series, sponsored by the Connectional Christian Education Department. We are certainly looking forward to doing the work of the kingdom in just a few weeks, everyone. Can you believe it? General Conference is coming in just a few. Few is probably too many. Maybe 2 weeks or so, we'll be gathered in Greensboro, North Carolina, and we want to welcome you to this first installment of our General Conference Boot Camp. For those of you who do not know me, I am the Reverend Patrick Barrett. I have the great honor of serving our Zion as the General Secretary of Christian Education. And as we were approaching General Conference, I felt impressed upon to take some intentional time to help to prepare our delegation for service. Right? We're not going on vacation. We are going to serve, to represent, to do the work of the church in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so we wanted to take some time to provide resources and information that would prepare our delegates and alternates to serve effectively, to participate, to be informed about the business of the General Conference and how we might tap in and serve effectively in that regard. So we're excited to have you on tonight, and I want to celebrate each of you for taking the time, prioritizing the time to learn, to gain new tools and new understandings that will help us all to serve effectively. So we also want to remind you that our second installment of the General Conference Boot Camp will take place on Monday, July 15th. Please note the time difference. It will be 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, July the 15th at 7 p.m. My colleague, Dr. Elvin Sadler, will be leading an orientation on the General Conference, providing kind of a basic orientation or understanding of what will take place at the General Conference, how the General Conference does its work. And that's important to understand as well, so that you are prepared with information that you might serve well at General Conference. So we're getting started so we can know who's in the room tonight. If you go down to your chat box, drop a hand wave emoji if you have served as a delegate or alternate to the General Conference before. We just want to know who's in the room tonight. So drop a hand wave, give me a hand wave in the chat box if you have served as a delegate or an alternate to the General Conference before. I see you. I see you. I see you. I see you. Amen. Amen. All right. We got some folks. I see you, Sister Johnson just wrote wave. I see you. I see you. Amen. Amen. So we've got some veterans. We've got some veterans in the room tonight. Well, then, of course, I want to know who among us is this your first time as a delegate? So drop a fist pump emoji in the chat if you are a first time delegate or alternate to the General Conference. Do we have any first timers? All right, I see a few. Hey, Pastor Kiara Watson, I see you. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, we've got a good mix here. We've got some hand waves. We've got some veterans. We've also got some first-time attendees, first-time delegates, first-time alternates. Well, beloved, wherever you fall in that spectrum, we want to say congratulations. Congratulations on your election. Your annual conferences have put their faith and trust in you to represent them well as we partner together to do the work of the General Conference. And so we are excited to be able to work together in the next few weeks to do that work. Well, friends, as many of you know, part of the General Conference, of course, is being clear on how rules are handled and how business is carried out over the course of the General Conference. And I felt that it was so very important for us, even if you're a veteran, if you're a first-time delegate or alternate, it's important for all of us to have a refresher on Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order are the rules that dictate the flow of business at the General Conference, not just in Zion, but meetings and conventions all over the globe. And so we utilize that, but the truth is, we also utilize some things that aren't right. And our speaker tonight is going to get us hip, is going to help us to utilize Robert's Rules of Order in a way that is proper and makes sense. And so we want to make sure that each and every one of us, myself included, I'm a delegate as well, we want to make sure that each and every one of us is Robert's Rules ready. And so we hope that you're ready tonight. If you're ready to go, drop in the chat. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. We are going to get started tonight. And I am so grateful. She has got to be one of the busiest people right now as we are moving towards the General Conference. I've had the joy of sitting in a workshop that she did for my Episcopal area, the Mid-Atlantic Episcopal area. And I know that she's also been sharing the truth, the correct process, the proper parliamentary procedure across our church. And so I am so grateful to welcome to our General Conference boot camp, Dr. Frances Jackson. Dr. Jackson is a lifelong resident of Detroit. She has worked in several Detroit area hospitals. She has been a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians since 1997. She is a professional. Somebody say professional. Amen. She is a professional registered parliamentarian and has given numerous presentations on parliamentary procedure at the national, regional, state, and local levels for a variety of organizations in numerous states and localities. And not only does she serve as the convention parliamentarian for the General Conference and really many other conferences, right, Dr. Jackson, throughout Zion, but she is also the president of the Michigan State Association of Parliamentarians. So we are blessed tonight to be able to welcome to the General Conference boot camp space none other than the parliamentarian for the General Conference of the AME Zion Church. Let's welcome her, Dr. Frances Jackson. Come on, let's welcome her tonight as she comes. Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. We are waiting. We're ready. We're ready. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Barrett, for that awesome introduction. Reverend Barrett did put a document in the chat, and if you can download that document, you'll be able to follow along with what I am presenting, and your arm won't fall off. Let me just say.
Oh, Dr. Jackson. I'm so sorry. I was so excited to introduce you. I forgot to say one other thing. Friends, we know that you'll have questions tonight. Yeah. Dr. Jackson is ready to answer your questions, but in order to keep some order in the space, everyone is muted. We want to make sure that everyone is able to hear and not to have to face interruptions. So if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen at the React button, there's a React button there where you can raise your hand. We're doing it old school tonight. So raise your hand if you have a question. Dr. Jackson will also, and our team will be watching. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand. You will get a notification asking you to unmute yourself, and then you'll be able to unmute. But if you don't know how to work all of that, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat or raise your hand and we will call upon you. All right. Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Okay. If there's anyone here from Montgomery, Alabama, while I am a lifelong resident of Detroit, my mama is from Alabama, grew up at Carnegie Chapel, in Montgomery, and I still have family at Old Ship and Clinton Chapel, AME Zion Church in Montgomery. I am the fifth of 7 generations of membership in the AME Zion Church, 7 ordained AME Zion pastors, presiding elder Frank Felder, who was the founding pastor of Homewood AME Zion Church in Pittsburgh, and Bishop Elijah Madison was my grandmother's first cousin. Before I get started, I certainly want to recognize Dr. Sandra Gatson, past president of the Women's Home and Overseas Missionary Society. I served as her parliamentarian for her 2 quadrennial conventions. And I saw her, and if there's someone else who is there, with 197 of you, I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but I did see her picture for a minute. So I know that Dr. Sandra Gatson is here. I'm going to share my screen. And if you have the handout, if you're able to download that handout and print it out, you will be able to follow along. I am going to do some skipping around because I don't want to, I want to make sure that I finish. So there's some things I am not going to cover. So the first section that has how delegates get elected, I assume you know how you got elected. I'm going to skip over that because I don't want to go over my time. So in terms of ground rules, as Reverend Barrett said, my preference is to answer questions while we're on that slide. If the questions get too numerous and I'm nervous about finishing, I may ask you to write the question down and we'll come back to it at the end. No question is stupid. The last thing I want is for 200 of you to come to this and then leave saying, I wish I'd asked so-and-so. I still don't understand so-and-so. Don't ever think that you have a question that's too stupid. If you don't understand something, chances are somebody else doesn't understand it either. Now, I am hard of hearing. I wear 2 hearing aids and I'm having trouble with one of them. So if you see me get up close, I'm trying to get close to the speaker to hear your question. I may have to ask Reverend Barrett or someone to help me out with what the question is. So let's get started. Every general conference has to establish its own membership. Every general conference has to establish its own membership. Once this general conference adjourns, all bets are off. The slate is clean. You establish your conference by the adoption of 3 reports. And these 3 reports must be done in a very specific order. And until those 3 reports are adopted, you don't have a general conference. They have to be done in a specific order. The first report is the credentials report. And the credentials report will say who is registered, and it will also tell us what is the voting strength. Those are 2 different things. There are going to be people at the general conference who are registered, but they are not delegates. So the credentials report is going to say who's registered, who's here. But it's also going to tell us what the voting strength is. And generally, the statistical breakdown of that report mirrors the Episcopal area. Now, before that report is adopted, there is no voting body of this convention. Let me repeat that. Before you have a credentials report adopted, there is no voting body. There is no membership of the General Conference. Once that report is adopted, any counted vote that exceeds the numbers we are given is going to call a halt to the proceedings. So for example, let's say the credentials report says there are 1,500 delegates and we have a counted vote and the counted vote is 1,507. Stop the presses. Who are those 7 people? And you'll see me say to whoever is presiding, ask for an updated credentials report. The report always includes the total number of delegates entitled to vote and the number of registered alternates. And it is always timed and dated. So what they should say is, this is the report of the Credentials Committee as of 9:30 a.m. on July 24th, 2024. It is timed and dated. Now, this next slide got me in big trouble with Mid-Atlantic and Bishop Moore. But I got to tell you what is the truth. Robert says an alternate can only vote in place of a regular delegate if that delegate is leaving the convention and not returning. Let me repeat that. Your alternates can only take the place of a delegate if that delegate is leaving the convention and not coming back. If that delegate is going out to lunch with her sorority sisters, if she's meeting her cousin, if she's meeting her classmates from Livingstone or Tennessee State or Alabama State, the alternate cannot take your place. Now, what Bishop Moore said that I was not aware of is that apparently it is the custom that when some committees, notably the Episcopal Committee, is meeting, the alternates vote in place of the delegates. That's improper. But if the General Conference wants to do that, then they need to have a rule that says under what circumstances the alternate can vote in place of the delegate if the delegate is not leaving the convention. Now, why am I making a big deal about this? You know, Francis, who cares? The Credentials Committee is responsible for knowing who is a legal person to vote. At any point during that week, the presiding bishop should be able to turn to the Credentials Committee and say, what is the credentials report? If you guys are going alternates in and out, voting for delegates and because they went to the bathroom, and there's a challenge to an election, how on earth can the Credentials Committee verify and document who is a legal voter? That is why Roberts has this rule. And what should happen is that if the alternate is going to replace the delegate, the two of you go to the committee and say, Reverend Deborah Lewis Verges is going to substitute for Sandra Gatson. She's the permanent alternate now who's going to substitute for Dr. Gatson. Dr. Gatson is leaving and returning to Chicago. So that's why this is important. Now hear me. You can have a rule that you can adopt that says, we're not going to function like that. We're going to let the alternates vote under any number of circumstances. That's fine. But if you don't have that rule, your parliamentary authority says you can only vote if that delegate is leaving and not coming back. Every business session of the conference, we will adopt a credentials report. The beginning of each session. It's a simple motion. It should be brought by the committee. Remember, as long as a committee of more than one person is making a motion, no second is required. So don't sit in your chair and holler out second. It's a motion by the committee. So no second is required. As we get towards the end of that week and the report is unchanged, then it is not updated and no vote is taken on its adoption. But every time, now what you also see is, I will probably say to the presiding officer, prior to the election, let's have the credentials report, so we know exactly what is the voting strength of the convention. Now, let's say the Credentials Committee gave its report at 9:30, and you arrive at the convention at 11 o'clock. Can you vote? Can you participate? Absolutely. Yes, you can. You don't have to wait till the next credentials report to take your seat and vote. But as I said earlier, if a counted vote is taken and the number of votes cast exceeds the number reported by the credentials committee, you will see me say to the presiding officer, get an updated credentials report. Because we got to make sure that everybody voting is a valid delegate to vote. So this is the first report that is adopted. It establishes the membership. The second report are the standing rules. And the standing rules say how you will function as a general conference. They identify the conduct of business at the convention. So for example, standing rule might say, put your electronic devices on mute or vibrate. A standing rule may say, you can only speak for 2 minutes and 2 times on any motion. If you have an interrupting motion, you can go to the head of the line. It may say any number of things, but these rules are important because they tell you how you will conduct your business. Now, Reverend Barrett, do you have a question for me?
Yes, ma'am. There's a question in the chat for clarification. If a lay delegate appointed to the secretariat, the alternate does not vote nor take that seat.
Say that again. I just barely, if a lay delegate is appointed to the secretariat.
I think the question is if a lay delegate is appointed to the secretariat, which I think is a good question. If a lay delegate is appointed to the secretariat, does an alternate take that seat?
No.
Right.
She or he continues voting.
They vote from the secretariat.
Yes, sir.
Is that right? Yep. I think that's the clarification that we need.
Yeah. Yeah, they continue voting. So these standing rules say how you're going to operate. What are the rules that are going to govern what we do? Now, Robert says, look, if the rules are not sent in advance, if they're not sent to people before the convention, they have to be read, even though everybody has a copy of them in the workbook. If you didn't get these prior to July 23rd or 24th, whenever y'all come, even though you have them in the workbook, Robert says they must be read. They are generally adopted as a group. However, any one delegate, without a motion, without a vote, can say, I want to pull standing rule number 7, or I want to pull standing rule number 9. And there's not a motion, you don't need a vote. One person can pull a rule. We then will vote on the remaining standing rules as a group, and it requires 2/3 vote to adopt the rest. And then after we adopt the group, we'll then go to the ones that are pulled and vote on them separately. Those are your standing rules. Now, if you want to amend a standing rule or rescind it, to rescind it is to eliminate it. It requires 2/3 or majority of the delegate. This is after they've been adopted. Now, if it was individually adopted by majority vote, then it can be rescinded or amended by majority vote if notice was given. But you cannot suspend the standing rule for the duration of the convention. That's akin to rescinding it. The third and final report. So remember I said there are 3 reports that open the convention. The credentials report says what's the membership. The standing rules say how are we going to function. And the last is the adoption of the convention program. Now, neither the presiding bishop nor the program committee has the authority to change the program after it has been adopted. They may act like they do, but they do not. Now, we have contractual obligations that have to be honored. So any changes in the program must be reasonable because of our legal liability. But adoption of the convention program is not just adoption of the business agenda, it's adoption of everything. The workshops, the luncheons, the banquets, everything that's in that program is being adopted, and you don't adjourn the convention until the last activity has been completed. After those 3 reports are adopted, credentials, standing rule, convention program. Now the general conference is open for the transaction of business. Now, what I am saying about the general conference is true about all conventions that meet less than 4 times a year. So your Jack and Jill convention, your sorority, fraternity conventions, your national social worker conventions, whatever your convention is, what I just said about the general conference is true for all conventions. Reverend Baird, do you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. Question in the chat. Who votes on the adopting of the credentials?
Who votes on the credentials report?
Yes. Who votes on
Delegates.
adopting the credentials?
The delegates.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now let's get to some basic parliamentary procedure. A main motion introduces business before the assembly, and there should be no debate on any matter before a motion has been made. Until you have a motion, you don't know what you're voting on. The motion is what tells you what the question is. Now, only one main motion may be before the assembly at a time. Now, let's not get it twisted. You can have any number of motions from subsidiary class, privileged, incidental, but only one main motion. Let me give you an example. Let's say there is a motion to purchase the property at 100 Main Street. That's the main motion. There's only one of those. And then there is a motion to amend that motion by adding the adjacent vacant lot. The motion to amend is a subsidiary motion. Then there is a motion to refer all of this to a committee. That's another subsidiary motion. Then there is a motion to limit debate on this matter to 1 hour. That's another subsidiary motion. Then there is a motion to take a recess. That's a privileged motion. I mentioned 5 motions. Motion to purchase the property, motion to amend, purchase the adjacent lot, refer to a committee, limit debate, take a recess. But of all those motions that I mentioned, only one was a main motion, and that was the motion to purchase the property. Now you might say, okay, how am I supposed to know what's a subsidiary motion and what's a privileged motion? You won't. Your parliamentarian has to know that. Those motions are not taken in the order they're made. They're taken in the order of their rank. And of all the motions that I mentioned, the highest ranking motion was the privileged motion to recess. So even though it was made last, it was the highest ranking motion, and it is taken first. So they're not taken in the order they're made. They're taken in the order of their rank. And your parliamentarian would have to know what that is. So you want to make a motion, you go to the closest microphone, and you know what happens at general conference: microphone 4, microphone 5, microphone 1, and the presiding bishop will recognize the microphone by number, and that's your indication that you have the floor. Correct. I move that, or I move to. If you're not saying I move that or I move to, you're embarrassing the people who sent you to convention. Incorrect. I want to make a motion. That's horrible. I motion. That's not even good English. I make a motion. That's not even good English either. Those are all wrong. I move that or I move to. All main motions require a second. Now look, seconding a motion doesn't mean you agree with it. Seconding a motion only means you want to talk about it. It's not necessary to go to a microphone to second a motion. You can call out for your seat, second. Now, if you make the motion, you cannot speak against it. Even if you learn something that tells you it's not a good motion, that's too bad. You can vote against it. You can't speak against it. Let me repeat that. The maker of the motion cannot speak against adoption of their motion, even if they learn something that tells them it's not a good motion. The person who seconds the motion can speak against it and vote against it. You can speak against it, you can vote against it. The presiding bishop states the motion. It is moved and seconded. The presiding bishop does not say it is moved and properly seconded. I don't know how we started saying that. I don't know why we say it. It's moved and properly seconded, as opposed to what? Improperly seconded? Stop saying that. It is moved and seconded. I don't know how you improperly second a motion. Maybe there's a way to do it. I don't know. You don't notice there are no names. He doesn't say it is moved by Patrick Barrett and seconded by Deborah Lewis Burgess. No names. Just it is moved and seconded. Until the presiding officer states that motion is not before the assembly. I'm going to repeat that. Until that presiding, in our case, bishop, says it is moved and seconded, there is no motion before you. And I see it all the time. Somebody will make a motion, someone will second it, and someone will say, well, I have a question. You can't ask any question. There's a motion on the floor. No, it's not. It's not on the floor till it is stated by the presiding officer. There's nothing on the floor at that point. There's nothing on the floor till it is stated. After stating the motion, the presiding bishop will say, are you ready for the question? Or alternatively, equally correct, are you ready for the debate? Y'all stop hollering question. Stop doing that. If you don't have a question, don't open your mouth. You sit there and say, it says it is moved and seconded debate. Question, and you don't have a question. Even if you have a question, don't say question. Go to the microphone. Stop doing that. We look silly. Reverend Barrett, you have a question.
Yes, Matt. Well, before a question, let me, the Saints are with you. You standing on business tonight, Doc. Let me ask you just a few questions, and if this is an appropriate time to do so. And I'm going to actually, Pastor Armour, I see you're on. I'd really like for you to unmute in a moment, Miranda, if you can find Pastor Jermaine Armour. If you're able, I'd love you to ask your question directly. But Dr. Jackson, one question going back to the adopting of the 3 initial reports. One question was, I thought that the delegates cannot vote until the 3 reports are adopted.
No, they're adopted one after the other. No,
Okay.
that's not correct. Until the credentials report is adopted, there are no motions that are in order. But once that credentials report is made, the first thing you will vote on is the adoption of the credentials report.
Okay.
And then you will vote on adoption of the standing rule. And then you will vote on adoption of the convention program. And it is after those 3 reports are adopted that the presiding bishop will say the whatever number general conference of the AME Zion Church is officially open for the transaction of business.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Thank you. I think we covered the question about which motion is voted on first. I think you were saying
first, because that establishes the membership of the conference. Until you get a credentials report, you don't know who's there, how many people are there, what is the membership of the general conference. So that report is voted on first.
Okay, what is the process when an alternate is seated as a delegate? Excuse me, what is the process when an alternate is seated for a delegate who is a no-show at the beginning of the Assembly of Delegates?
Whoever is president of that conference delegate group should report that to the credentials committee.
Okay.
So that your status can be changed from alternate to delegate.
All right. Thank you. Pastor Armour, are you able to unmute and ask your question?
I am, Reb. I'm here.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you for this session. Let me just really pause and say thank you for this entire session. This boot camp is great. Been going to general conferences since about 2004. So having this is definitely new, breaking ground. Thank you for hosting this. Thank you, Reverend Barrett. And thank you, Dr. Jackson. Wow, you are standing on business tonight, no cap. So I'm loving this. Here's my question. When you mentioned about the motion that someone makes, I always thought that motions were, very serious, and someone makes a motion and then they make a sub motion. And so that sub motion takes precedence over that main motion. Is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. The
Okay.
main motion is the lowest ranking of the 13 motions. There are 13 ranked motions, and the lowest ranking motion is the main motion. It takes precedence over nothing and yields to everything. And when you think about it, Reverend, it makes sense. Let's go back to my example. My example was the main motion was to purchase the property at 100 Main Street. And the first subsidiary motion that was made was to amend it by adding "and the adjacent vacant lot." What sense would it make to vote on the adjacent vacant lot if you then don't vote to purchase the building? That doesn't make any sense. You could be voting on purchasing a lot and then you vote down purchasing the building. That's crazy. So all of these things affect the adoption of the main motion, and they all outrank the main motion. Of the 13 ranked motions, the main motion is the lowest ranking. It takes precedence over nothing. It yields to everything.
Excellent. Pastor Armour? We good?
Does that answer your question? Has he disappeared?
Miranda, you may have to unmute him again.
Any other questions, Reverend Barrett?
Yes, ma'am. One other question for you. Did you say that the names of the persons making a motion and seconding a motion do not have to be documented in the Secretariat notes?
I did not say that. What I said was when the presiding officer states that motion, the presiding officer does not say any names. That's what I said.
So it does need to be
The presiding
recorded.
officer says it is moved and seconded. The presiding officer does not say it is moved by so-and-so. Instead, in the secretary's notes, all makers of the names of all makers of main motions goes in the minutes. The name of the seconder does not. Let me repeat that. The name of the person who seconds the motion does not go in the minutes.
Excellent.
But the name of the person who makes the motion goes in the minutes. Now, the first missionary quadrennial I attended, Dr. Adley's Ivy Porter was the president. And when I told those missionaries the name of the seconder doesn't go in the minutes, I needed the National Guard to protect me to get out the room. I was glad I was a Christian because I thought I was going to meet Jesus that day. Okay. And what she told me was people were used to seeing their name in the published minutes as seconding a motion. And I said, well, that's crazy. The name of the person who seconds the motion doesn't go in the minutes. Them missionaries had a fit. I cut all that out. And what struck me, I remember to this day, the sweetest looking little old lady went to the mic to second the motion and gave her whole life history. I, Frances Jackson, president of the parent body of the Woman's Home and Overseas Missionary Society of St. Paul AME Zion Church for 48 years, 70 years a member of Zion, my grandfather and father, all AME Zion pastors. I second the motion. I said, what the hell? I it. And I said to the president, she doing that? She says, well, she's second. I said, her name doesn't go in the minutes. All she has to do is sit in her chair and say second. So let me be clear. When the presiding officer states the motion, the presiding officer doesn't state any names. All they say is, it is moved and seconded to purchase the building at 100 Main Street. In the minutes, the maker of the motion, the name goes in the minutes, not the person who seconded the motion. Now, after everyone has debated who wishes to do so, they should state the motion one last time so you know what you're voting on. Saying those in favor say aye, those opposed say no. Do not ask for abstentions. If you are asking for abstentions, I beg you to stop. An abstention is not a no vote, it is a non-vote. People who are abstaining are not voting. Why on earth would you count that? Why would you count that? You're basically saying, everybody not voting, raise your hand. Isn't that stupid? It sounds stupid. It is stupid. What do you care? Now, let me give you a life example. Let's say there are 1,000 AME Zion delegates in that room, 1,000. And there's a motion, and 9 people vote in favor, and 1 votes opposed. That motion carries. There are 1,000 people in the room, 9 people vote in favor, 1 votes opposed. That motion carries. The motion, adoption of the motion is based on the number of people who vote, not the number of people in the room.
Say that one more time, Doc.
Carrying the motion is based on the number of people who are voting, not the number of people who are in the room. So if 990 of you sat there and didn't vote, that's your business. It doesn't matter. We're not counting it. That motion carried on 9 people. Now, you're a delegate and you were sent by somebody to represent them. So if you're sitting there not voting, Francis would be concerned if you're a representative from the Detroit district.
Come on.
I didn't send you there to play Subway Surfers on your iPad and be talking to your friends. So if you're not voting and I can see you, I'm going to say, whoever is the president of our delegation, why we send them Negroes there and they're not voting? However, no one can force you to vote. We just don't need to re-elect you as a delegate. You can not vote at home. You don't need to go to Greensboro to not vote. Keep your behind in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Texas, and not vote. Don't say those in favor say aye, those opposed use the same sign. If you're saying that, stop it. It's not use the same sign. Those opposed say no. Announce the results.
All right, one other question for you, Dr. Jackson. So let me say, Saints, put your Subway Surfer away. I used to love that game. Yeah. Put it away.
Me too.
There is another question, Dr. Jackson, and we're going to go on with our presentation. So all subsidiary motions must be voted on before we return to the standing motion for final vote to pass or not?
Yes. So let's go back to my example. I won't say all, but because it depends. In the example I gave you, we had the motion to purchase the building. We had an amendment to purchase the adjacent lot. We had a motion to refer to committee. We had a motion to limit debate. We had a motion to recess. The privileged motion to recess will be first because it's the highest ranking. The next highest ranking is the motion to limit debate. That's the next highest. It would be voted on next. Then there's the motion to refer. Now this is tricky. If the motion to refer to a committee is adopted, then the main motion with the amendment goes to the committee. Let me repeat that. If the motion to refer this matter to a committee is adopted, then the main motion with the amendment all goes to the committee. And when the committee reports back, it will report back on the main motion and the amendment. So you would not vote on the amendment if the motion to refer to a committee is adopted.
Okay, so main motion and the amendments would go to committee.
It depends. It depends on the subsidiary motion and what is happening.
Okay.
Okay. Now, rules of debate. People think that whoever got to the mic first and screamed out number 4 or number 1 gets to speak first. That's not always true. Whoever makes the motion has a one-time preference to speak first on that motion. They don't have to take it, but if they want to, whoever speaks first has a one-time preference. Whoever makes the motion, the maker of the motion, has a one-time preference to speak first on that motion. And what the presiding officer should do after he or she states the motion is that look at the maker of the motion to see if they want to speak. They don't have to, but if they want to, they get to speak first. Second preference of recognition. The presiding officer should alternate between those in favor and those opposed. Now you might say, well, how are they supposed to know? You ask. So for example, the bishop might say, 2 people have spoken in favor of the motion. Is there anyone opposed who would like to speak next? If there is, that person goes to the head of the line, even though they were not at the mic first. So the bishop should alternate between those in favor and those opposed. And if he doesn't know, all he has to do is ask, but whoever is in that group goes to the head of the line, even above someone who was in line before them. The third preference is that someone who has not spoken goes in front of someone who has. So even though the person at microphone 2 might have been first, if the person at microphone 4 has not already spoken, they would go ahead of the person at microphone 2. So those are the 3 preferences of speaking in debate. Whoever makes the motion has a one-time preference to speak first. The bishop should alternate between those in favor and those opposed, and not just go by who's screaming out microphone 4, microphone 5, and someone who has not spoken takes preference over someone who has. I'm going to skip over this. We have a lot of reports that we receive at the General Conference, and these reports are in the workbook. Most of these reports have no recommendations. Ideally, they should not be read at all, but I don't have any hope of that happening. But what I do want you to do is to stop moving adoption of reports. Please stop. There is no way to make a report valid or legal or official. And in fact, it's a very dangerous thing to do. Stop making motions to adopt reports. Let me tell you a true story. And some of you were at that General Conference where this happened. I know with 238 of you, somebody was at that General Conference. I'm not going to name names, but one of the bishops, in giving his Episcopal address, mentioned another bishop by name and said that bishop had been derelict in his duty. I ran to the podium and said to whoever was presiding, whatever you do, don't entertain a motion to adopt that report. Now, why was I so concerned? If we had adopted that report, it would have been the position of the General Conference that Bishop X was derelict in his duty. That report then would have become the official position of the AME Zion Church. I don't know why we moved to adopt Episcopal reports. The bishop says This is what I've been doing for the last 4 years. Why are you moving to adopt that? It's a personal opinion. Adopting it doesn't make it official, doesn't make it legal, doesn't make it valid. We've got to stop doing that. And then to add insult to injury, people say they're unready, not because they're unready, but because they want to tell Bishop Stearns what a wonderful bishop he is. We don't need a motion to do that. What the presiding bishop should say is, Bishop Stearns has done a stellar job as the presiding prelate of Piedmont. He's to be congratulated. The chair will entertain 3 delegates who wish to express their gratitude and congratulations to Bishop Stearns. Now, there are 3 people at the mic. Don't you get up. That's the 3 I'm taking. I ain't taking no more than that. But you got all these people lined up to say the exact same thing and talking about they unready. Unready about what? You don't believe him? Stop making motions to adopt reports. Now, there's an exception to that, and I'm going to talk about that at the next slide. Let me say this one last thing before we get to questions.
Mm-hmm.
Reverend Baird told you that I'm president of the Michigan State Association of Parliamentarians, and I am.
Oh, yeah.
At our annual meeting,
Yeah, tell this story.
in April, we had our opening ceremonies, the reading of the vision statement, mission statement, reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, an inspirational message. We then had 20 officer and committee reports. 20 officer and committee reports. How long do you think that meeting lasted? Put it in the chat. How long? Oh, 20 committee reports and 4 unit reports. The Detroit unit, the Mid-Michigan unit, the Kalamazoo unit, and the Oakland County unit. 20 officer and committee reports, 4 unit reports, and opening ceremonies. How long do you think that meeting lasted? Just put it in the chat. Put in the chat what you think. How long you think that meeting lasted? What are they saying, Reverend Barrett?
Doc, I think some may have heard this story. So we got 45. We got 4 hours, 2 hours, 6 hours, all night. Someone said
It lasted 45 minutes. I called the meeting to order at 9 a.m. and we adjourned at 9:45 a.m.
Wow.
It lasted 45 minutes. We don't read reports that have been sent to the membership. We don't read them. You don't highlight them. You don't summarize them. I said to the officer, do you have anything to add to your report? No, Madam President. Are there any questions for the first vice president? Thank you very much for a stellar job. Next, we have the report of the second vice president. Madam Second Vice President's report was uploaded. Madam Second Vice President, do you have anything to add to your report? No, Madam President. Are there any questions for the second vice president? There are no questions. Thank you, Madam Second Vice President. You've done a stellar job. Next is the report of the corresponding secretary. Madam Corresponding Secretary's report was included with all the other reports. Madam Corresponding Secretary, do you have anything to add to your report? No, Madam President. Are there any questions for the Corresponding Secretary? 45 minutes. 45 minutes. We assume that everyone who's a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians can read. That's a basic assumption, that they can all read. We don't read reports that have been uploaded to the members. Now, Reverend Barrett, I'm assuming you have a question.
We do. I just want Dr. Jackson, though, to emphasize what you, to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, is you were able to move efficiently because those persons, delegates, as it were, the assembly had already done the work before coming to the general conference by reading reports, being prepared with any necessary questions,
right,
that you were able to get through your work. So that's also, as we're preparing, right, we should be doing the work of receiving, of reading and all of those, reading those reports and the agenda, all of those things prior to our attendance at the meeting.
Yes.
Right. Yep. Just wanted to reiterate that. So again, to your questions around proper process, we have a few questions here. Given that we are learning the proper procedures, how and who can stand to correct an action to adhere to the proper parliamentary rule?
Okay, I think it's very difficult, and I'll tell you why. Not everybody's getting this training. You have a forward-thinking leader who said, I want you to know how to do things properly.
Mm,
But not everyone's getting this training. And
mm,
custom is very powerful. Custom is so powerful.
yeah.
What you've always done is so powerful. You are so accustomed to moving adoption of Episcopal reports and then saying unready because you want to tell, Bishop Frencher what a wonderful bishop he's been. I have no problem with you telling Bishop Frencher he's wonderful. I have a problem with you moving to adopt Bishop Frencher's report. Stop doing that. It doesn't make it official. It doesn't make it valid. Doesn't make it legal. Someone has given you their personal opinion about what they've been doing for the last 4 years.
Mm.
Why are you adopting that? It's a waste of time. Custom's very powerful.
Indeed,
Look,
indeed.
I'm 75 years old. I normally say I'm 70. I've been a member of the AME Zion Church for 75 years and 9 months because my mother was a member of John Wesley. So I've been a member of the John Wesley AME Zion Church. And I understand custom. When we got a new pastor who started changing stuff, I said, excuse me, you skipped over the confession for communion. Did you forget that? He said, well, we said it at 7:30. I said, well, we need to say it at 10:30 too. That confession stuff is important.
Mm.
So what I'm telling you, I'm just as guilty of. I'm not pointing a finger at anybody. I'm just as guilty. We no longer do responsive readings at John Wesley Southfield. We cut that out during the pandemic, and we've never added it back. You know how long I've been doing responsive readings at John Wesley AME Zion Church? I mean, custom is very powerful.
Yeah.
Very powerful. And it's going to be difficult to change. Difficult.
So
It's a good question.
is that would that be your role, Dr. Jackson, or are persons to offer correction from the floor, or who would put us back on proper order if
Well, my hope is, because the bishops always bring me in early to do a training for them.
Okay.
And my hope is that when I do their training, if they don't entertain a motion to adopt these reports, then no motions will be made. So my hope is that when I do their training, I can get them to stop entertaining motions to adopt these reports. That's my hope.
So someone also asked, let me get a few other questions. And then I see Dr. Gatson has a question. So Miranda, if we can prepare Dr. Gatson to be able to unmute herself. Dr. Jackson, someone did ask, is there a phrase that should be used instead of saying adoption of report?
No, don't say nothing.
Right.
Keep your mouth shut. What the presiding officer should say, we had this outstanding report from Bishop Proctor. He's done a fabulous job. We appreciate you so much. We'll entertain 3 people who will be able to tell Bishop Proctor what a wonderful bishop he's been. Don't say nothing.
Got you. Now, what determines length of debate?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
There's a question, what determines length of debate?
The standing rules that you adopt. And those standing rules, it will have a standing rule about length of debate. However, if you're sick of people talking about it, move the previous question. That's a motion to cut off debate. Someone has to second it. It requires 2/3 to be adopted.
Okay.
I don't think I'm going to have time, but it's one of the things that's in your handout is how to move the previous question to stop debate.
Okay.
Dr. Gasson is still muted.
Dr. Gatson, if you're able to, there she is.
Okay, it says I'm unmuted now. Oh,
Yep.
thank you, Reverend Barrett. And Dr. Jackson, this is wonderful. You are superb. And this is so much good information. It's almost hard to remember it all, but thank you for this. The question, actually, it's been asked. That was my question. What determines length of debate? So, and I'm hearing that I still don't get the understanding of that. What determines how long you can debate? And I know you said
So are you talking about how long you discuss a topic?
Exactly.
Or how long each person can speak in debate?
No, how long you discuss a topic.
Oh, so y'all get tired of it and you move the previous question.
Okay, so you got your pros and your cons, correct?
Yeah.
And so
if you're now moving the previous question is not an interrupting motion. You can't interrupt. You got to wait your turn. It has to be seconded, and it requires 2/3 to be adopted. But if you're sitting there saying nobody's saying anything new or different, they're just going round and round and round.
Right.
Go to the mic, wait till you're recognized, and say, "I move the previous question."
Okay.
Susan Fitzpatrick will second that motion because she gets tired of people talking a long time too.
Okay.
And then you vote 2/3 to adopt. And if the motion to call the previous question is adopted, you immediately go to vote on the motion.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Jackson, we'll take this one and then we're gonna keep going. But there's a question around reports that. So the question is, it is clear that some reports are received while others with a recommendation are adopted. Can you speak
so
to
here, let's talk about that. No reports are received. The reports are received when they're heard. So there's never a motion. I shouldn't say never. Rarely would you need to make the motion to receive a report. And you would not move to receive the report after it has been given. After it's been given, you've received it. Okay? If you move to adopt a report that has recommendations, you just adopted the recommendations. Whether you wanted to or not. Now, if a report has recommendations, those recommendations are taken separately. And an individual officer cannot move adoption of their recommendations. So if Reverend Barrett is giving a report for CED and he has recommendations, he can't move adoption of those recommendations. Somebody else has to do it. He can't do it. Now, I told you there was an exception to all of this, and the exception are financial reports. Even with a written financial report, even though you've got pages and pages, the financial officers must orally report at a minimum the ending balances on all financial accounts, and that should be in the minutes. So the exception to what I just said about reports are financial reports. Even with a written financial report, extensive financial report, the financial officers must still orally report the ending balances. Do not adopt unaudited financial reports. Do not adopt unaudited financial reports. Do not adopt unaudited financial reports. After what we have been through in the AME Zion Church, why would you move to adopt an unaudited financial report? Why would you do that? The treasurer says, this is how much money you have. I move to adopt. Why? What you adopt, if it's been done, is the auditor's report. Why? The auditor has gotten bank statements, checkbook, voucher books, minutes, financial records. He's not just taking the treasurer's word. And if the report has not been audited, then what the presiding bishop will say without a motion, the report will be filed for audit. He'll ask for questions. You always have the right to ask questions. So let's say a report is given, it has not been audited. The presiding bishop will say, are there any questions about this report? And we'll entertain questions. And then after all questions have been entertained, he will say, without a motion, the report will be filed for audit. No motion is required. There are no motions that should be made on financial reports, none. Now, if an auditor's report has been done, then what the treasurer or chief financial officer should do after all questions have been asked about the financial report is read the concluding statement of the auditor's report, and that is what you adopt. You adopt the auditor's report. Because what did I just tell you? The auditor did what? Got the financial records, got the checkbook, got the financial statements, got the voucher book, got the minutes where you said we had $989,000 in account X and so forth and et cetera. And the auditor's report will say, this is a fair representation of the liability and assets of the Amy Zion Church as of June 30th. So what you adopt, if there is one, is an auditor's report, not a financial review. We don't adopt those. But you adopt an auditor's report if one's been done. Stop adopting unaudited financial reports. And let me say this to all of you. My guess is that none of you are getting your local accounts audited. Why not? Why aren't you doing it? You don't have to go out and hire Deloitte, Haskell's, and Sells. You don't need a CPA. You need 3 people who had nothing to do with the money to get the voucher book and the checkbook and the financial statements and go through and make sure that everything is kosher. Some of you have had accounts for years and you have never had them audited. Let me tell you what I know. I don't care how little money you have enough for somebody to steal. Care how little, you got enough for somebody to steal. And some of you have had the same treasurer for 20 years and you've never had the books audited. That's not smart. That's not smart. What I said about officer reports is also true for committee reports. There should be no motion to adopt committee reports. The difference is if a committee has recommendations, as long as it is a committee of more than one person, they can move adoption of their recommendations. Now I'm going to stop here. And we've got about 20 minutes. What I'm not covering is how to do resolutions. How we do resolutions in the Amy Zion Church is horrible. And it's wrong, it's incorrect, it's terrible. And I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to do some training on how to do resolutions correctly before God calls me home, because it's the one area where I feel the worst, because I've not been able to make a difference in how we do resolutions. Do you know that nothing requires you to have a preamble? You're not required to have a preamble. You don't need a preamble. You don't need all them whereas clauses. All you have to say is resolve to amend Article 4, Section 2 by inserting every year. How you do, yeah. I'm hoping that I can get something done with that before they roll me down the center aisle at John Wesley Amy Zion Church. Now, somebody had their hands up. Reverend Baird, do people have their hands up?
Yes. I thought I saw Pastor.
Someone had their hand up.
Is that Miranda Xavier?
Well, what I want to do at this point, I was going to do specialty motions, but I'm going to stop at this point because I want to take questions. I don't want you to leave and say, I wish she had covered A, B, and C, and she didn't. I'm still confused about X, Y, and Z. I've got 15 minutes left, and before I get to doing what I want to do, I want to cover any questions that you might have. So everybody who has questions, this is the time to ask them.
All right. Well, let me thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. A few questions that are in the chat. Is there a term used after minutes are read?
Say that again.
The question was, what is the term used after minutes are read?
Okay. So what the presiding officer should say after minutes are read, and this is not just for the general conference, this is for everybody. Are there any corrections? Takes corrections and then says the minutes are approved as corrected. Now, what I want them to do is to have a standing rule that factual corrections are taken directly to the Secretariat. Factual corrections. It's Marion Johnson, not Mary Johnson. You need to take up our time making those kinds of corrections. Those are factual corrections.
Okay.
Reverend Patrick Barrett from St. Paul AME Zion Church, Muskegon, not Toledo. Those are factual corrections. And you don't need to take up the time going to the mic to make factual corrections, that they will allow factual corrections to go directly to the Secretariat. But when, even in your local trustee board, steward board, missionary society, what you do is you say, when the minutes have been hopefully sent, uploaded ahead of time, are there any corrections? You take the corrections. After all corrections, you say without a motion, you don't need a motion, the minutes are approved as corrected. The only way to object to correction of the minutes is to have a motion to amend them with a correction. You can't just say, I don't like those minutes. It doesn't work like that. So you don't need a motion to adopt the minutes. You don't have to sit there. I need a motion. Somebody please move. No, you just say, are there any corrections? Take corrections. Then you say without a motion, the minutes are approved as corrected. Period. You don't need a motion. Y'all waste so much time. You just waste so much time. I'm 75 years old. I don't know how much more of my time I can let y'all waste. I really don't. The pearly gates are beginning to creak open for me. And I gotta be respectful of my time. I don't got much left here.
We need you, Doc. We need you. Let's run through just a few other questions, Dr. Jackson. There's a question: must you go to the mic to call for the previous question?
Okay, I just talked about that, but I'll talk about it further. You're sick of listening to debate. They're not saying anything new. You've been talking about this 20 minutes, and you're like, okay, we're tired of this. It is not an interrupting motion. You can't interrupt. You can't go to the head of the line. You got to wait your turn. Two people have to want to stop debate: the person who makes the motion and the person who seconds the motion. So when you are recognized, you say, I call the previous question. Someone has to say second. It is not a debatable motion. So the presiding officer is not going to say, are you ready for the question? It is non-debatable, non-amendable. You can't debate it, you can't amend it. He immediately goes to the vote. All those in favor of calling the previous question, please rise. Be seated. Those opposed, please rise. It requires 2/3 vote of those voting, not those in the room. What did I teach you? The vote raised is dependent on the number of people who vote, not the number of people in the room. 2/3 vote to adopt. If the motion to call the previous question is adopted, that cuts off debate, and you immediately go to the motion and vote on it. No more debate. But it is not an interrupt. You can't sit in your seat and say, I call the question. You can't do that. It's not an interrupting motion. You got to go to the mic. You have to wait your turn to be recognized. Two people have to want to call the question: the person who makes the motion and the person who seconds that motion. And want to say one other thing. If there's several pending questions, You can call the previous question on all of them. Not just the one that's immediately pending. You can call the previous question on every question that's pending. Or you can call the previous question on 2 and not the third one.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. There's a question here. What about a motion to receive a church budget?
To receive a what?
Church budget?
Why would you have a motion to receive a church budget?
Is there no
You
such
don't
thing?
need a motion to receive the budget. The pastor can't get paid till the budget is approved. Why do you need a motion to receive? You don't need a motion to receive a church budget. Whoever in your church presents the budget, hopefully it's the trustee board, but maybe it's the finance committee. They should be on the agenda. It's time for the church budget. And the church budget is presented. You have the opportunity to make amendments to it. And then it is adopted as amended.
So in the context of the general conference, can you maybe walk the group through that? The Budget Apportionment Committee will make their report on the budget. What's that process look like for us?
So the Budget Committee is going to make a report on the proposed quadrennial budget 2024-2028. And at the end of their report, one of them should move adoption of the quadrennial budget. You can't discuss it till there's a motion made to adopt it. Okay? Now, typically, what will then happen is that a bunch of y'all go to the mic and complain about how much money you're being assessed. This is tricky because one of the things that should happen, that if you want to make a change in one line item, you have to be able to talk about how that affects the bottom line. Okay, let's put it like this. Let's say the quadrennial budget has a $500,000 overage for over what is going to be spent. So there's $500,000 left for contingencies. And the Midwest delegate says, we're hurting in the Midwest. We can't pay this. I move that the Midwest budget is decreased from $450,000 to $400,000. If that is adopted, it will reduce contingency from $500,000 to $450,000. That's what should happen. If you want to do something to the budget, you have to tell us what is the effect to the budget of that motion that you made. Okay?
Got it.
I see Susan Fitzpatrick.
Yep. And before we're going to bring in
you shouldn't have any questions. I just spent 2 hours with you 3 weeks ago.
Well, we're going to bring in Sister Susan in a second. I do want to say, Dr. Jackson, my Taurus brother, Pastor Tim Freeman, who is the chair of Budget and Apportionment, has certainly has dropped a teach in the chat. So you're getting some amens there. Sister Susan, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, Dr. Jackson. Hi, Reverend Patrick Barrett.
Hey.
Like Dr. Jackson, you have done an excellent job with Michigan, with WALS. I would like for you to emphasize the fact that whoever's chairing the meeting or the presiding officer cannot discuss anything. They just preside.
The presiding officer can't do what?
Discuss. Can't talk, just preside.
I didn't get into this, but I will.
Thank you.
If you are the presiding officer, you cannot participate in debate. You can't give your opinion. You can't make suggestions. You can't tell folk what you think they ought to do. You cannot participate in debate and preside. You cannot participate in debate and preside. If you do, you'll feel me pulling on your pants. Now, why does Robert say that? As the presiding officer, you will rule on parliamentary procedure. How can I trust your ruling if you've been telling me what you want done? What you don't want done. You've been running your mouth saying, do this, do that. I don't think we ought to do this. And then when it comes to a ruling, you're no longer neutral. You've been saying what you want. How can I trust that? I can't. I can't trust your rulings if you've been running your mouth. You cannot preside over a motion if you want to discuss it. Can't do it.
Thank you. Thank you for emphasizing that. And thank you for that question, Sister Susan. Another question for you, Dr. Jackson, is what if the person desiring to second is not at the front of the line?
You don't need to be in line at all if you want a second. Just say second from your seat. You don't need to get up and get in line to say second. If you want to stand up, you can stand up, but you just say second.
From
Say it
anywhere,
your
anywhere
seat.
from
you
your
don't need to
seat.
be in line. Don't get in line to second a motion. Just say second. As long as the presiding officer can see that someone seconded the motion, that's all we need.
Excellent. I thought I saw a question from Pastor Kenneth Swan, but there's a lot of, it was about the secretariat. I'll try to look for that. Let's see. Dr. Jackson, your PowerPoint, will that be available for sharing?
No. You have the handout, and the handout mirrors my PowerPoint.
Okay. So we've dropped
Everything on my PowerPoint is in that handout. Everything. In fact, there's stuff in the handout that I did not get to. There's stuff in the handout I did not get to. And I told you my pet peeve is how we do resolutions. And at some point, before God calls me home, I'm going to help AME Zion Church to do that correctly. Just got to do it.
Amen. Well, I think those are, team, if we can find, I think the question, and Pastor Swan, if you're still on, Ken Swan, I think there was a question around people acknowledging when they speak during the conference, acknowledging their name, Hey, brother, there you are. Can you ask your question,
evening.
sir?
Good evening, everyone. I'm honored to be on the Secretariat again, representing Eastern North Carolina Episcopal District, and to help all of us out from Dr. Jackson herself. When you come to the mic and you are recognized by the presiding bishop, please state your name, your title, your name, and your annual conference who elected you as a general officer, as a general conference delegate, not your Episcopal district. Kenneth Lamont Swan, Central North Carolina Conference, as is what you say. You don't need to say your Episcopal district. That does not go into the minute.
And what is important about that
Thank you, Doc.
is you have to establish that you are someone who is eligible to be at the mic. So by stating your name and your conference, you're saying, I'm here as a delegate from, in my case, if I were a delegate, Detroit, Western Michigan Conference of the Michigan Annual Conference of the Midwest Episcopal Area. So you're establishing your legitimacy for speaking. Okay, now let me say one last thing before we leave. I've talked about a lot of stuff tonight, and some of it, I'm sure, for some of you is new and different and strange and things that you're not doing in your churches. Do not go back to Clinton Chapel, Liggett Chapel, John Wesley, St. Paul, and upend those organizations. You can't go back and say, y'all doing everything wrong, and I know the right way, and I'm the only one who knows how to do things right, and it's not gonna work. And your feelings are gonna be hurt because you're gonna say, they don't wanna do things the right way. People need to be gently and slowly led into making changes. You come in after 1 hour and a half parliamentary training and you want to tell everybody what to do, and they're going to tell you to sit your rusty dusty in a chair, and you're going to be hurt you can't remake Rome in a day. It's just not going to happen. And so rather than getting your feelings hurt, my suggestion is go for low-hanging fruit. As far as I'm concerned, low-hanging fruit is that you stop adopting unaudited financial reports. Stop doing that. Stop adopting reports that have no recommendations. Stop doing that. But there's some other things you got to kind of slowly, if you got a presiding officer who's always speaking in debate, you don't want to get up in the meeting and say, you're supposed to be quiet. You don't want to embarrass someone like that. You're going to get pushback. And then you're going to be the one who's saying they don't want to do things the right way. I mean, no, you just can't remake Rome in a day. If you want me to come and do a parliamentary training for your church or your area, I'll be glad to do it. I can do it via Zoom. Maybe sometimes hearing something from somebody else who's not a member of your church or district might be more effective or powerful than you saying it. The last thing I want to say is I am a member of John Wesley AME Zion Church, Southfield, Michigan, and we are starting a new endeavor called John Wesley University. And what we will be doing starting in the fall is posting topics of interest on our website. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to be posting a parliamentary training on basic parliamentary procedure. I'm going to be posting a training on how to write bylaws for your church organization. And I'm going to post a training on how to correctly write resolutions. That's going to be on the John Wesley AME Zion Church Southfield, Michigan website under the tab John Wesley University sometime in September or October. We hope to have that up.
Excellent.
So you will be able to come to our website. We're hoping to have a number of topics for all ages. Like I said to the young people, I don't know nothing about AI. I see it, I don't understand it. I don't know if it's the work of the devil or some other kind of something. I want one of you young people to do AI for seniors. But we're going to have a number of topics, but I'm going to be posting topics on parliamentary procedure. Anybody will be able to come to the website and get the basic parliamentary procedure presentation. And I know the time has passed for resolutions. I'm working on 2028. If I start now at working on what you're going to be doing for 2028, maybe I can get y'all to do it properly by 2028. So Reverend Barrett, it's after 9 o'clock and it's past our time. I don't want to hold up your people. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope everybody is taking something away from this, that it was worthwhile and that you learned something worthwhile. I appreciate you. And when you see me in Greensboro, come up and say hi. Be sure and speak to me and say hi. I'd love to meet some of you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. And I do know that there is even more. Friends, can we show some love and gratitude in the chat to the Dr. Francis Jackson? We're so grateful for your time tonight. And I know that there are certainly other topics and certainly other points that we could cover. And so, Dr. Jackson, we'll continue to talk because we also, as the Christian Education Department, education is essential and key. And so we certainly want to ensure not only for General Conference, but in the general business of our church and our churches, that we are engaging in proper process and conducting things appropriately. So there's a whole lot of love in the chat coming your way, Dr. Jackson. We want to say thank you for what you do to keep this old ship of Zion on course as best as you are able to do under the circumstances. And so, Dr. Jackson, if I can just ask you, for persons who perhaps want to learn more about parliamentary procedure or even to take on that as a career, is there any kind of quick knowledge you can share about what direction or next steps they should take?
I suggest that they go to the National Association of Parliamentarians website. Once you're active on that website, there's a map of the country that you can click on, and it will tell you what are the local units closest to you. Roberts is not user-friendly. It's not intuitive. You got to have an uncle in the furniture business to translate Uncle Henry. I'm serious. So you got to get with people who can help you understand not what just Roberts says, but what it means. Those are not the same thing. If you don't have a local unit near you, there are several virtual units that you can join that meet virtually. Join a unit, get involved. Every meeting of an NAP unit, there's an educational lesson. Every meeting, there's an educational lesson, and start learning and start studying.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. So friends, this brings us to the end of this first session. Let me again thank so many of you. I think at one point we were up to about 250 persons who are with us tonight, and we still got 229 who are here tonight. So I know persons were eager to get this information and knowledge tonight. There's a whole lot of, again, Dr. Jackson, a lot of love for you in the chat and gratitude in the chat coming through right now. And I want to, of course, thank you, Dr. Jackson, and I want to thank all of you, my co-laborers in the delegation of this general conference. We're grateful for you taking the time. And I didn't, even as I'm going through the chat, I'm seeing some folk, oh, I didn't know half of y'all was up in here. But we're grateful. Some of my colleagues, our general officers are here tonight. Some of our connectional officers are here tonight. We also praise God. We've got some friends all over the globe tonight. We've got some friends from London and Ghana and Barbados who are with us tonight, all over. And so we are grateful for your representation tonight in this session. Let me remind you, friends, we will pick up with part 2 of our General Conference Bootcamp series, July the 15th. July the 15th, my colleague, the Reverend Dr. J. Elvin Sadler, the General Secretary Auditor of the AME Zion Church, will provide for us an orientation to the General Conference, how it's structured, processes, a business that will take place, all of those things. So you'll want to join us for the last installment of our General Conference Boot Camp, which will again be July the 15th. Again, this session has been recorded. We will share that with only to the delegates and alternates. And again, I'm going to ask the team if you would drop the handout in the chat. Again, Dr. Jackson has prepared a handout for you. And so that's in the chat right now. Please go ahead and click on that attachment, download it, save it to your device, and all of those things. I'm going to also ask you, Pastor Hunter, if you can drop the resolutions booklet, because again, as you heard Dr. Jackson say, it is our responsibility, friends, to come prepared to do the work of the General Conference. So that means reading our resolution, studying those things, discerning how those things impact our future as a denomination. And the reports as well, when those come out. I'm not entirely sure when those will come out, but Dr. Sadler can share more about that during his session as well. But at the very least, we can do the work now to read the resolutions, to study them. If you're on an interfacing committee, make sure that you're aware of the work of that committee and any type of pre-meeting discussions that will be taking place in your, as it pertains to your interfacing committees for the General Conference. So again, Thank you, beloved. We are grateful to each and every one of you. We'll stay on. You're free to go. I know that some people may want to look through the chat and get any of the documentation. You can feel free to kind of scroll through the chat for any questions for a moment. But thank you, beloved. We appreciate you. Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. You are the bomb.com. Oh my gosh. We are so grateful to you for your time and all of what you offer to our beloved Zion. Good night, friends. God bless you. We'll see you again on July the 15th. Take care and be blessed.